Do you guys understand how impressive it is to be the worst?
Through it ice cold. No! Oh my god!
To be able to say, yes, I'm a professional player, just to stink up the scene and be complete poo-poo caca. I've made 2 previous videos on topics similar to this, talking about some of the worst players in Counter-Strike history. And it's getting to the point where I take this topic extremely seriously. So I want you to stop what you're doing. Go rent out a suit, some nice pants, sit down with a glass of wine, get your steak and mashed potatoes, and ponder with me as we search for the worst Awper in Counter-Strike history. The big green can be a bit mean, especially if you aren't built for it in the tier 1 scene. I've seen many bad Awpers in my 21 years of life, but the question of who is the worst has, for the most part, remained unanswered. I mean, people of course have their opinions, but there has to be an objective answer, right? Well, I personally think there is. It's you, the viewer. Stop role-playing as Odyssey, brother. You just look like Mon Shitty. But luckily for you, and luckily for the runtime of this video, I'm looking for a professional Awper. And the odds of you being pro are fairly low. So that means I have to go to the almighty HLTV page. When going to 2025 specifically, you start to notice a few things. Today, we're constantly blessed by ZywOO 1.3 ratings. I mean, Buddy's just a rifler now, but we're still gonna count him. Along with Monacy and Shiro farming. But most players are not even close to a rating like this. Normally, Awpers that have been playing very well and are easily above average fall to around a 1.1-ish rating. Torji has been incredible to start 2025, and his rating is a 1.12 this year, with the next best being Woxic at 1.07, which is kind of closer to where you see most of the Awpers in tier 1. And then the more average-ish ones are around a 1.03 to a 0.99. If we look at the worst Awper of this year so far, it's been fallen with a 0.9 rating. Holy shit. But he recently switched to being a rifler and is an IGL. So if you don't like counting that, the next worst is safe with a 0.93. Vamos Brazil, fellas. Anyways, surely there has to be some worse Awpers than 2025 Fallen and Safe. So if we expand to include every year of CS2 and Go, we can start to sift through some of these stinkers. And when actually looking at a lot of these numbers, I noticed a lot of things that were very interesting. Awpers that in my brain I always regarded fairly highly, never really had that great of ratings. For example, my goat Skadoodle, major winner. His all-time rating is a 0.99. Pasha Biceps, his rating is a 0.96. JDM, the funny lounge guy, his all-time rating is a 0.96 as well. Legendary Awper JW is a 1. For context, Shazam, the current Valorant streamer, his all-time rating is a 1.01. No way all of these players are worse than Shazam. Well, realistically, they aren't. A really big factor in this stuff is how long someone played. Along with this, Shazam did not have the peaks a lot of these other Awpers did. When looking back, a lot of these legendary Awpers had incredible peaks, but they were very short-lived. When we look at Skadoodle, for example, he hit his peak in 2014 on iBuyPower, in 2015 on Cloud9. The HLTV ranking system didn't exist before 2015, so we can't use it for the years before, but in 2014, Skadoodle did post a 1.12 overall, and then in 2015 against top 20 teams, a 1.07. After that, he was just the most consistent 1.01 Awper that I've ever seen. He was great for 2 years, and the next 3, he was just kinda average, which brought down his rating quite a bit. Pasha Biceps is honestly an even better example of this. He was a pretty big hybrid, but I'm still counting him as an Awper just like I count ZywOO.
You are not my friends, you're my brothers, my friend.
But his peak was from 2012 to 2014. In 2013, he was the 19th best player, and in 2014, he was the 3rd, along with a major MVP. So an incredibly good peak, but once the HLTV ranking system came out in 2015, he was no longer in his prime. So the numbers against top 20 are really not that great. Honestly, even against teams not in the top 20, it wasn't great. From 2012 to 2014, his overall rating was a 1.12, and from 2015 to 2018, when he eventually left VP, his rating was a 0.98. Anyways, I'm talking about literal legends of the game. Of course, none of these players can even be close to the worst Awper of all time. And even other players like JDM, who might not be legends, putting up a 0.96 rating against top 20 teams is more than enough to get you out of the WOAT Awper conversation. Along with this, any player that stayed in a tier 1 team for over a year can't be that bad. So that means we need to switch to looking at a different type of Awper. I cannot wear those fucking glasses anymore, man. I think to really be able to find the worst Awper in Counter-Strike history, we need to look at something called tier 1.5 Awpers. The first person that I think is a great example of this is someone who just played in the Austin Major, Junior. Most people know his tragic story by now. In 2020, he impressed on a tier 2 NA team, and being in a region that simply does not produce any opping talent at all, his 1.13 rating was easily enough to get the attention of tier 1 teams, but the team he'd end up joining wouldn't even be North American, they'd be Brazilian. Furia would pick up Junior at the start of 2021, and it was a complete disaster. A 0.89 rating against top 20 teams, and by June of that year, he would ask the team to step down. It was an incredibly strange environment for a young American player, and he decided it was time for him to go home. Afterwards, he'd play in a tier 2 team again and post a 1.27 rating. He was back. Because of this performance, he'd get called up to Complexity, where he would start his second stint in Tier 1. During his time in Complexity, he'd only post a 0.92 rating. This is when something became incredibly clear. Junior was a Tier 1.5 Awper. Too good for Tier 2, but not nearly good enough for Tier 1. Sadly, he was kind of just stuck in the middle. Another great example of this is Alistair, who used to play for FlyQuest. If you filter through his online games, which are nearly all Tier 2, he has a 1.17 rating. But then as soon as you go to all of his matches with the top 20 filter, he drops to a 0.91. Another thing that normally separates Tier 1.5 Awpers from Tier 1 Awpers is the length of time on Tier 1 teams. Junior was on Furia and Complexity both for less than a year, and Alistair was also on FlyQuest for less than a year. When most Tier 1 Awpers, even if they're at least average, they can stay in a team for more than a year. Now, considering both of these guys against top 20 teams are about a 0.9 rating, they absolutely are in contention for the worst Awper of all time. And you might be saying, oh, well, 2025 Fallen also has a 0.9 rating. Why isn't he in contention? Guys, it's Fallen. What are we even talking about here? Anyways, I just can't put these guys in the conversation for the worst Awper of all time, and here's why. They might be atrocious in Tier 1, but to this day, both of these guys still dominate in Tier 2, and honestly, that still matters to me. You still have to be an incredibly good Awper to dominate in Tier 2, so I feel it would be a little bit disingenuous to put them as the worst Awpers of all time when they're still both very good players overall. They just aren't Tier 1 material. So at this point, the WOAT Awper can't be a Tier 1 player. It can't be a Tier 1.5 player. So what does that leave us with? I'm happy you asked. This is easily my favorite and the most promising category yet. A part-time Awper is someone who normally is a rifler, but picks up the AWP out of necessity. They don't typically stay on it for that long, and some even do a fine job. The first person that comes to my mind was someone who was a temporary Awper and was pretty decent is Automatic in the late part of Cloud9 and his time in Gen G. But I'd say most are incredibly bad, and my god, is it fun to watch. Let's start with someone who made the grand finals of a major as the team's primary Awper, Amanek. After Kenny S was benched in March of 2021, Jax would be brought back to the active roster to replace him. But the only issue here was Jax was a rifler, along with literally every other player on the team. So a decision would be made that Amanek would be the team's full-time Awper for the rest of the year. And honestly, it was a pretty good year for G2. They'd make the finals of IEM Cologne 2021,
where they'd lose,
and the finals of the PGL Stockholm Major,
where they would lose.
Now, when watching Amanek, it was pretty obvious this dude was not built to be an Awper, but numbers-wise, he wasn't that bad. But most of the time, you really don't want your Awper to be that mediocre. So he was benched at the start of 2022 for Odyssey. What are you gonna do? It's Odyssey. A couple other great shouts for the worst Awper of all time are Smiths and MSL. Smiths is kind of a weird one because normally he was a support rifler, but he would also pick up the AWP a decent amount in 2014 and 2015, with his only real year of full-time AWPing being in 2016, where he had a 0.91 rating, and the next year would immediately go back to rifling. Along with him, you know MSL had to be on here, but MSL was actually better than I remembered him being. He was a long-time Danish IGL who always kind of stuck around like the tier 2, tier 1.5 Danish teams. Individually, he was never really much of a fragger, but he wasn't awful. Anyways, from 2019 to 2020, he picked up the AWP out of necessity, where he tied Smith's 0.91 rating. A 0.91 rating as the main Awper is pretty tough, and as you might have noticed, throughout all of these bad Awpers we've talked about, the floor seems to be at around a 0.9 rating. I know you might say, what about Junior's 0.87? Well, if we look at all of his top 20 games today, it's a 0.9. 0.9. So even Junior is at a 0.9 and no lower. But what if I told you there was someone else? Someone who during his time opping went negative in 86% of the games he played, had a 0.8 rating, and was so doggy he got kicked immediately afterwards, and then turned into a legendary meme. The main character of our story today is someone by the name of Solek. Solek would start his competitive career in 2010 on Counter-Strike Source. His first ever tournament would be ESL Pro Series Germany Season 16 Finals, which he would go on to win. Shortly after this, he was then picked up by one of the best orgs in Germany, Alternate Attacks. One thing to note here as well, Solek is not German himself, he's Swiss, but he always just competed on German teams. Anyways, during his time in Alternate Attacks, he would also go on to win ESL Pro Series Germany Spring 2012 Counter-Strike Source Final. So with a tournament under their belt as they went into Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Alternate Attacks were feeling fairly good. And honestly, it would start off great, as they would form another ESL Pro Series Germany tournament. Then going into 2013, it was a disaster class. Until they would play ESL Pro Series Germany Spring 2013 League, where in the groups, they would come in first place. Goddamned ESL Pro Series Germany farmers. But then in the playoffs, they would sadly lose to Mouse Sports in the third place decider match. A Mouse Sports with Kerrigan on the team. Did you know Kerrigan was on Mouse Sports before a stint in like 2018? They would then go on to finish out 2013 with no notable results. And in 2014, they would continue to get sunned by Mouse Sports at every turn. And it wasn't even Kerrigan Mouse Sports. It was Mouse Sports with Cadian and Chris J. Then eventually, after mediocre results all year, Alternate Attacks would release their entire squad on June 3rd and sign a new German team on June 12th. This meant Solek and the boys would need a new home, but for the time being, they would compete under the name Berserk. By this point, Solek was also the IGL, and going into Star Ladder Series 10, he decided the team would need a change. At this point, the team was Solek, Alex RR, Felix, Crystal, and Asmo. These players were all riflers, and none of them wanted to op. So for Star Series, the captain Solek would take up the Awper role. He wasn't much of a fragger, posting a 0.99 rating in 2012 and a 0.86 in 2013. Along with this being his debut tournament using the op, the team's list for Star Series was absolutely stacked. Prime Fnatic, Hellraisers, Na'Vi, Titan, Virtus Plow, LDLC, Epsilon, and Mouse Sports were all here. Just recently being released from the org he had been a part of for 4 years, him being a non-fragging IGL, being a main op IGL for the first time ever, and playing legitimately the best teams in the world, all came together to produce the perfect storm for the worst op performance in Counter-Strike history. And their first match would be against none other than Fnatic. First 3 rounds is a nothing burger, but on round 4 we finally get to see him with the op. A fairly standard play of holding mid, but sadly, he gets owned by a shoulder peek, and after falling back, he simply just gets owned by JW. Next round is a save, and we're back, baby. He's holding the same angle as before, but this time he actually wins the duel. Old CS was so beautiful, man. Fnatic know he's gonna be holding this angle, but instead of using any util, they just try and bait him out with the player jumping and then JW peeking. He then gets dry peeked and fed another kill, and holy fuck, this dude just got a 2-piece against Fnatic. He might actually be the GOAT, not the WOAT. Next round, Fnatic actually flash him off the angle, then simply do nothing, and boost peek him and get owned. He does end up getting a second kill that round, but they still lose. And then he does this to JW. I might be a complete fraud for putting him in WOAT contention in the first place. This guy's a goddamn animal. We then get to this round where he is just completely unaware and gets ran down, which ends up losing his team the round. Later, he has the op for 2 rounds on T side, but doesn't get a kill in either. It's significantly harder to use an op on T side than just holding dry peeks on CT side. But in his defense, considering how much of a blowout this game ended up being, it really wasn't even that bad of a performance. Am I a fraud for talking about him in this video in the first place? After this, he'd play VP and they get blown out, but once again, he played fine. He then put all of his hatred, the countless times of getting blown out by Mouse Sports, into his next game, where he would drop a 1.21 rating against them
in a loss.
After that, they'd lose to Reason, where once again, he didn't even look atrocious. But here's the thing. All 4 of these matches happened on the same day. Buddy was popping stimulants, he just couldn't be stopped. Well, I say he couldn't be stopped. During this day, he posted a 0.94 rating, which for him was very good. But I guess you could call this his opping honeymoon, because after this date, he would go on to post a 0.85 rating and go positive in 1 of the next 11 games. And all of this would finally come together on August 6th, 2014, where Solek would have his magnum opus. Former Berserk, now Penta, would be playing legendary French team Epsilon Esports, where he would first have the AWP in round 5, and he would do this. Now, early on, it was looking like a blowout, and in order to avoid falling asleep, two Russian casters, Slam and Strike, would begin to start having some fun and singling out Solek simply due to how atrocious of a game he was having. And even though, for the most part, I can't understand a word that is being said, it is one of the funniest Counter-Strike videos I have ever seen.
Полезная АВП очень. Посмотри, как разыгрывает Солик. Очень полезная АВП. А вдруг кто-то подожмет? А вдруг это будет команда Эпсилон? Включи Солика.
Где там Солик?
Солик.
Вау, вау. Давай смотреть за ним.
Солик. Free Fire. Вау. Всех напугал.
И с бомбой просто разворачивается, кидает своих тиммейтов, отдает длину и уходит в центр. Они хотят выйти под Б.
Ему просто внутренний голос говорит: Солик, беги.
Это просто не КС.
Солик!
Это какая-то... Посмотри, там сейчас что такое будет на медле. Ой-ой-ой.
Солик!
Солик, тащи! Солик, давай, нет!
Бля, ну вот, ой, пока был Солик, этот раунд не может выиграть команда Penta Sports. Солик!
Солик, why you stay? Why you stay, man?
Старается Солик.
Солик, СВП. Посмотри.
А что, он накопил ману на выстрел?
Да, у него... Он же еще и с редлайном, смотри, заметил
Так, Солик. Момент истины.
Солик и Солик.
Сука!
Тут Солик идет на длину. Солик и... Вот это поворот.
Солик!
И не Солик, как...
53 секунды до конца этого раунда. Солик хладнокровно контролирует проход по зигзагу, но там никого нет.
И понимает то, что Тэшка... Сколько это уже? Свою должны бояться, потому что Солик идет на... И Солик! Как так-то, Солик?
Сколько настрелял Солик?
Until finally, he did it.
Солику остается только сейвить девайс. У Солик находит.
АВП! Солик! Да есть же!
Солик делает минус
9 раундов
СВП.
спустя Солик делает.
Then did this right after.
Пуэн, бомба у Солика в руках. Солик.
Зумится
вот
в
знаешь,
очко.
всё у
Смотри,
Солика.
Солик смотрит в очко.
Солик!
Нужен минус, Солик. Его тиммейт идет рашить, его тиммейт пушит, умирает, и Солик.
Хотя бы минус, Солик, давай!
Ай, Солику не везет просто тотально. Некогда легендарная АВП не может ничего сделать. Опять.
Солик!
Солик, ай, Солик! Солик не смог и на релайне.
Патроны закончились у Солика!
И... Ну да, по нему видно, что он доволен собой.
Солик.
Солик понимает важность.
Так. Yes! Солик! Какая бомба!
Да, Солик бежит спасать положение на пульте.
Ща, говорит, я его накажу. Ты видел? Ты видел?
И Солик бежит убивать центр.
Солик! Yes!
Жестоких, качественных раундов в исполнении Penta Spортс. Солик и игра на центре. Вообще. Просто прострел от бога.
Солик! Что ты творишь?
Смотри, погоди, повтор.
Ну, блин, он вообще не
Погоди,
щадит.
повтор от Солика, ребят. Вау! Продолжает играть. Солик идет с АВП на...
Солик, а как же?
Солик!
Как же? Камбэк. Солик.
After this match, Solek was an absolute celebrity in the CIS community, and the video I got these clips from currently has 1.1 million views. After this game, and his .87 rating with the Awp, in the early days of Counter-Strike where Team's utility usage was just atrocious, Solik is going down in my book as the worst Awper in Counter-Strike history. But like I always say, don't be sad, Solik. This isn't a knock on you. It's an absolute privilege to be the WOAT of any part of Counter-Strike history. So thank you for your contributions, and thank you guys for watching.